What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Shift Happens with myself, Darian Weems.
And Jonathan, guys, hope everybody's doing well.
Yeah, I hope you guys are doing well. Today we have episode queued up for you. We had a little camera difficulties last time, but today we're gonna look at how some companies are using AI. Looking companies using AI. We are going to take a look at kind of some of the closures and bankruptcies that are happening across the industry. Also, some more carb stuff happening. You know, the truck makers are suing carb over the clean truck obligations. So we'll kind of talk about a lot of that here. Stay tuned. First and foremost, though, Tal, talk to us, man. How's the week? How we doing? You got a great haircut there. Lead us off with the great haircut.
Yeah, Bar was like, man, we gotta change you up since you've been posting a lot of content. I gotta, do a little bit better job. I was like, hey, all fine with me, so go ahead, do your thing. But yeah, man, week has been good. So we're month 8, almost end of the year, right before the holidays are about to start. So, a lot of us are seeing a lot of crazy news, you know, industry. But hey, and be part of more of our team on pushing through and keep our trucks rolling, drivers moving, and yeah, let's get into it. So
Yeah, a couple of big companies in our market, kind of one went bankrupt, another had an organized wind down, as we call it. And I think it's just a byproduct of how difficult the market is, how um a lot of companies have scaled into a very particular business model, I would assume, and that business model kind of in real time is becoming less viable. It's part of the reason why we're doing some of the things that we're doing internally with kind of shifting around the model and kind of looking to expand into other places, different markets. But I think ultimately it is just a byproduct of the business model changing, particularly for for the companies in our market there, will say Northern California drayage. It has just been really a difficult year. It's not going to get any easier right here towards the end of the year. And I think that's a thing that a lot of people are looking at, just like, kind of weighing the pros and cons of like, man, do I want to keep fighting this thing out? Or particularly these companies that have been around for a while, they're just maybe thinking, hey, you know what, let's freaking hang it up. We had a good run, it was fun while it lasted. And then, some of the other companies is just across the country that we're seeing kind of either go bankrupt or close down. Yeah, it's the same, the same things that are kind of affecting us in our market are really affecting the country, if you will. And so, a lot of the freight that was either supposed to come in or did come in, but at different volumes. That freight is supposed to kind of matriculate itself all around the country and turn into truckload and less than truckload stuff for other carriers, flatbed loads, the whole nine. And a lot of that stuff just isn't materializing in this market at scale, particularly for the amount of capacity that got added during COVID. So it's a tough market. It's going to continue to be a tough market. The signs are not really looking particularly great for like what the future holds, which is why we're like really throwing on our like big boy and girl pants here at JNS in order to like make difficult decisions and really just fight and scrap and do everything that we can on a week to week basis to keep things moving normally and naturally. It has been a little bit I will say, like, slightly positive to get feedback, right? We were talking to some of our dispatchers, and we've had a lot of drivers who maybe left us for greener pastures, right, earlier in the year. And they've seen a lot of the companies in our market kind of, start to close their doors and are not being able to pay drivers kind of on a regular basis. And they're seeing us in the market and they're saying, hey, these guys are surviving. They're finding a way to make it work. And we are. And so I think that's a hint of positivity here internally at JNS, is that we are making it work, in a tough market. And like you said, Tal, shouts out to the team, because it really takes a concerted effort from all of us to continue to make this engine move in the way that it's moving. But do you have any thoughts? What are your thoughts on kind of the closures, the bankruptcies? Talk to me.
Really, like, you see the news, right? But nobody really knows exactly what happened. Oh, what are the few factors that took them down, right? A company like those. So I will say a few things that I will say is over the years, one, California market, right? It used to be great. I mean, it's still great to be honest, like for us, even though we face a lot of challenges, like for one, a lot of these car rules and regulations changes five came into play, right? And look at these companies. They were not just trucking companies. Like back in the day, most of these were just trucking companies. And then they had to convert it into a brokerage, right? So what does that do? It changes staff, a lot of things you have to do, and the cost to do business gets higher now, right? Because there's more layers with these rules and regulations, right? Another thing is, California is just expensive to do business. Truck parking, right? Even though these companies were brokerage companies, right? So maybe there a few things there was the software costs are a lot of money. They had Trinium, I guess. That is not a cheap software. Another thing is they were probably handling like the 20 top customers, meaning Medlines of the world, Dollar General,
Tesla is another big one I've heard.
in order to handle 20 top tier customers for one brokerage or one trucking company, it might not be an easy feat. Meaning, there's a lot of issues at the port, right? Congestion issues, holidays come into play, and that causes a backlog. So, for example, you got thousands of containers a week that you're picking up, let's say on a Friday, and you're not able to ingate those until Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. All of that per diem, chassis rent, storage, all of that gets piled up. And I believe there was a dispute or lawsuit between Amazon and one of these companies where, this was like matter of like $50 million, but he only got probably settled for like not even half. So they ended up losing, let's just say $7 million. That's a lot of money on just one customer. Imagine if you had to do that across 10 of your customers, right? Where now you realize all of that money that you made and that you paid top dollar to your owner operators was not, who's gonna pay that price? All of these owner operators did, right? 30 to $40,000 per owner operator lost that much money. I'm not saying that company didn't lose any money or the staff, but hey, who knows the whole story? All we've seen heard is this driver's side of the story, right? But anyways, don't want to drag this on to a longer conversation, but there's a lot of other insight to it that happened over the years that took them down.
One of the companies we talked to recently, a big brokerage that wanted us to like increase our costs essentially to manage their stuff. And it's like, listen, man, if you have all of these views about how it should be done, buy the trucks, hire the drivers, right, and do it yourself. But like, don't try to dictate down to us like how the thing is supposed to be done because like clearly it's a difficult job and you don't want to do it. I just think we're in an interesting market. The market is very difficult and it's very difficult to operate in this market, and so you have to do it well. You have to not just service the customers well, but you have to keep the drivers in mind. You have to keep really everyone in mind, your whole staff in mind, right? And it gets tough and tough decisions have to be made. But yeah, I think we're putting ourselves increasingly in a better position here moving towards the end of the year. So yeah. So also it looks like here we had M&T Bank, which is an equipment lender, um, had 400,000 in unsecured claims tied to 47 trucks. Which in my mind actually doesn't seem that far off. Like I don't know, kind of 400,000
Maybe a couple of
for
trucks.
47 trucks. Yeah, that's like
Just
doesn't
to
even seem
put it
too
in
bad.
practice. So usually during the COVID years, when drive by like a dealership, you'll see empty lots, right? Versus now, if you were to see a bunch of trucks parked on the side of the freeway, like these dealerships, you'll see that the dealerships are packed, right? But there's a backlog now of trucks being, what do they say, like it's the highest ever been the car repo game. So just look at the trucks. So all the trucks that got repoed in California did not have space to park those trucks. They're now being shifted to other states where they have more land. So what does that tell you, right? There's not a lot of buyers out there. There's excess amount of trucks. I mean, even if you were to buy a truck, there's not enough freight. So a lot of times what happens is our drivers would ask the company, like, hey, if I buy a truck, will you dispatch us? Right now, the answer is no, right? Because there's not enough freight for, for all of our, yeah, we have enough freight just to cover that amount of, our drivers, but we cannot add on any more drivers or owner operators because, we do not have enough work. So what does that do? Those drivers are still holding their jobs. They're not going out there to buy trucks. And then all the new drivers that are getting their licenses, they're not on the backlog, also waiting, and they're just doing their jobs and not able to find, jobs out there. And then just look at how many per day driver requests we get for jobs. By that you could tell a lot, what's going on.
Yeah, pretty significant. I've been talking to a lot of the drivers kind of leading the recruiting efforts down in Texas, and you know, one of the earliest things that comes up, I'm asking them about kind of, where they're working now, how it's going. And often they're like staffed on with some staffing agency and there's just not enough freight. And so they're trying to find a gig that kind of has, more freight. Honestly, it doesn't even have anything to do with like the pay or anything. They're just like, hey, can you keep me moving? I was talking to one lady earlier. She's like listening to the reality TV in the back, laughing, talking to me. I just think it's a tough time for a lot of people. And like we've said multiple times, I think we're truly blessed to be in a position where like we we do have enough freight. Even with the Texas kind of expansion here, we're gonna still have freight because a lot of our customers also operate there. And so we're gonna move there and solve pain points for them as well. But like is just tough. So yeah, seeing these truck lots full, I'll be interested to see how it shakes out with as many like as they start to roll out the newer trucks, right? And still having all of these old model years from the past year and a half that haven't been brought up. It'll be interesting to see kind of what they look to do with those and what happens. I guess it's kind of a perfect segue, but like zombie carriers, right? Do you think they're keeping the rates too low in the industry? Too many kind of, you talked a little bit earlier about how in the past the guy would go and buy a truck and look to lease on and just get dispatched out. Maybe there's been too much of that the last 5 years, right? Where everyone felt like, yeah, I could go buy two, three trucks and then lease on and also be a driver here, right? And there's just such an excess of capacity that it seems like it's kind of depressing the rates a little bit there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, most like it, the last segment we talked about a lot of other people that got during COVID saw the good times, right? And they did not calculate the cost of doing business, right? So there's insurance, there's registration fees that come later in the year when their bank account doesn't have enough money. They realize, oh man, we've been operating at a loss, and that's what a lot of the business. So definitely the rates, I guess. A lot of people just want to move their trucks, which they should not be doing. You're gonna work below your costs, and then that's how these companies go out of business, right? They don't stand their ground, I guess. But another thing is, customer service. With us, why do we have enough freight? Because our team does a great job on provide transparency and above and beyond customer service to our brokers and direct customers. You see right now the biggest demand is they want reliable carriers, trusted carriers. These, yeah, you can find these cheap carriers out there, but you're gonna realize your freight is ghosted. What you're gonna take that risk? Sure, take it. And you're gonna pay that price, and then you're gonna probably end up losing that customer.
Yeah, you get what you pay for oftentimes. And like you said, I think earlier in the year, out of the fear of it all, we kind of caught ourselves up in the race to the bottom there. But I could kind of genuinely say in the last 90 days or so, we've really been like, just like super firm with people and prices and customers. And it's just like, if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. Right. And, oftentimes people end up coming back to us. And, I think that, that the idea of just keeping trucks running even at a loss is, ultimately kind of putting yourself in a bad position because you're destroying the assets really, which is where kind of a lot of the secured value in these businesses come from. And then, if the worst does come, then you don't really have anything there that kind of worth anything if you've driven the trucks into the ground there. So it is definitely an interesting time in the freight world. Gotta hold your ground out here. But I will say, the rates are where they are because that's where the market is, man. This is one of those true markets in the world where like, it's supply and demand. So if like there's somebody that's willing to take that load for that price, then like that's where they're getting posted at. Yeah. So, um, kind of circling back, you know, ESC, TSG, a lot of these companies that are, a lot of them been in the business 25, 40, 80 years. Um, what is and then they're just shutting down suddenly or filing for bankruptcy suddenly. And so what is a warning sign, I guess, that a trucking company is in trouble before they end up shutting down? This is actually from some of the conversations we've been having recently, the thing that brokers have been trying to nail down recently because they're like, well, so we had no idea. And now we're just left stuck. So what are some things you would be looking at?
So it depends, right? Two ways to look at it. So this was pretty shocking to a lot of people that GSC went down, right? The number one thing was, about 3 months ago, I talked to one of my buddies that worked with GSC. He was like, "Man, they're holding four of my checks, and now it's five checks." And I told him right there, I was like, "That's a red flag." And within those 3 months, those checks went up eight checks. So that's 8 weeks of pay. Tax that by $5,000 a week. And that's just
Yeah,
one. So they had what, 160 or 70 on our payers, right? So the signs there are if a carrier is not able to pay you after, standard is like 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, you get your pay. So yeah, sure, the problem there is happening is like the brokers and the shippers are delaying payments from 30 to 45 to 60 days. And this has been happening since last year, right? So yeah, there's a lot of pressure on these companies because they're being backlogged, right? Another thing is if it's a trucking company, there could be a lot of red flags, right? Payroll is they have uncommon issues internally, and the trucks are getting repo. That's a big one. I mean, again, as long as the thing was like these companies are not ever transparent. They did not like TGS, like another buddy of mine worked for TGS, and then they're like, you know, we didn't even know. Only like the owner kept it under wraps or something, and then even the staff didn't know, and then all of a sudden you came in, boom, doors closed. So a lot of times it sucks. I think that's where the ownership and the management need to do a better job on, not putting themselves because a lot of people's families are livelihood are at stake, right? Because one of those guys might be just only person providing for his family, and now he's not going to get paid for those few weeks. It just hurts to see that more and more happening. Yeah. I mean, that's all I had to say, on that. But again, this is the third year that the things have not been turning around. Now we're going to be
yeah,
the fourth year, right? A lot of people are just getting tired by it. And a lot of these owners might be in their close to their retirement, then they're just like, we're done, man. We're
for sure.
hanging it up. Like, it's just not worth the headache. And especially if they're losing money and putting money out of their own pocket, then yeah, it's time to go. You know, the-
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, everything you said, I think they're spot on. Do I have anything extra to add there? I think, at least internally, and we try to be transparent. And I think that transparency kind of can drive people a little bit. It's like part of why we've been able to like rally, I think, so hardcore is just because people know it's like, hey guys, shit's tough. And, it's going to take all of our concerted efforts to continue to make it through in this market, and that means that everyone's really doing the best that they can to not just service the customers but to ensure that the company is in a good position. If you're a customer looking in, trying to figure out if the carrier that you're about to do this deal with is going to be around in a few months to do the loads, I think really the things that you highlighted are probably pretty key there, right? Like, are they like, is their insurance like up to date? Are they getting kind of these like strange cancellation notices and then not? Are their trucks, being repoed? Are they having a bunch of just interesting change? Also, I think people don't talk about this enough, but like how are the vibes, Like vibes are like a real thing and like you can just tell. And so if the vibes are like spooky, not to say that like, because I think people should be very serious, but if the vibes are like fear vibes, then, it's probably not going as well as it should be going. And if the conversations aren't about, how the carrier is going to help you solve your problems and kind of build out the processes in order to help you expand your business and really their whole conversation is about maybe how quickly or much or things of that nature they could be paid, then those are probably some canaries in the coal mine as well. So I think you hit it on the head there with a lot of those things. Tal, if you had to bet $100, will we see more or fewer bankruptcies by Christmas, and why?
I think so. I think we'll see more bankruptcies, especially with what was the number, 30% less freight coming in to the market, and then especially if you can, because the cost of doing business is a lot, right? Because you cannot go, let alone few months, a month, by not having enough freight to move your trucks, because the cost is going to be still there for your insurance, for your staff, for your, you know, roof over your head, right? Your office, the whole deal. And I definitely think there could be more bankruptcy, especially when you talk to the banks and compliance people in the market that are actually helping these companies, mechanics. So a lot of right now. So what's happening is a lot of the mechanics are, even to us, they're like, we want payment right away, because what's happening is a lot of these other carriers are not paying these mechanics.
Uh-huh.
So they just think of us as like, usually the payment terms, they were able to give you a week or 2 weeks or whatever that term is. But look, most of the mechanics right now do not want to give that, because they know the risk of them losing out on 30, 40, 50 carriers is a lot higher. So that's why they want the payment right on the spot. So that's also been happening.
Yeah, I would bet $100 on that very easily. Wonder if they got a poly. I should throw a poly market up. Will more trucking companies go bankrupt? Absolutely. And yeah, there's going to be less freight. Also, the economy is just not looking as strong as it, you know, was. I look at a lot of data, but credit card delinquencies are up, mortgage delinquencies are up. The average credit score of Americans, I think, is falling for the first time in a long time. Another interesting one is visits to local food banks, right, here in America, right? That is going up. And so if you kind of take a comprehensive look at like all of these things that are happening, it just kind of says, hey, the economy isn't as strong, let alone freight. Like freight, that's like a different thing, right? But like just the economy isn't doing as well. And so with an economy that's kind of on the edge, obviously freight you could say is maybe even a leading indicator of a lot of the things that happen in the economy, because in order for the economy to move and to be productive, goods and services need to move around. And so if our industry is slow, that's probably a leading indicator for the fact that people aren't buying as much stuff and doing as much consumption. So I would take that bet all day, every day. Put me down, $100. A fresh Ben Frank. All right.
Did you see the news about Vegas? I just wanted to bring this up real quick. It's just a lot of if everybody's following the news, right? Obviously, that's another sign, right? Because the tourism went down. That's also going to hurt the economy. Less people are traveling into the U.S. from, especially like the Canada, and overall, people are just traveling less, right? I mean, that's also has effect on freight as well, right? Because if there's not
Absolutely.
another thing was, I think that the COVID era, what it did was all of the events I was looking into this was all of the events that were happening are now online, right? So it's not it used to be all those big events used to happen gatherings in Vegas, right? So that also took a dip. So again, you can connect the dots. So overall, so those are also having a negative effect of the economy.
I 100% agree. It is a tough time for today and into the near future. Moving on, C.H. Robinson execs are talking about how AI is improving their trucking metrics, right? And so I don't know if you saw this, but they said AI boosted their quotes by 30%. Not sure if that means the amount of quotes they're able to give or things of that nature. But so, yeah, the amount of quotes that they were able to give. And so, does that mean that people are losing their job or getting more efficient? Both. Yes. Yes. Right. People are losing their job and people are becoming more efficient. And honestly, it's the way of what the economy is going to be doing. I think on and off here for the next 10 years, probably. We're probably about to go through like just this slow and steady grind of every industry undergoing like their own kind of AI revolution. The first things that are going to go are going to be a lot of these kind of desk computer jobs that can be easily offloaded to AI, right? And so, a thing that we're internally looking at is how do we, automatically reply to a lot of these rate quotes as well, right? And so there's just going to be this cycle of here's an industry, here's a subset of jobs in that industry, rapid efficiency, job loss. And then another part of the industry, rapid efficiency, job loss. And that thing is going to happen across every industry, across every job classification for the next 10 years. It's going to make its way into manual labor as the robots come online, right? So, Figure and the Tesla Optimus and there's a bunch of other start. China has a bunch of interesting startups in the space, but you know, pretty soon we're gonna see like the Chat GPT moment for robotics, and that's gonna be spooky because there's gonna be robots doing a lot of the manual stuff too, right? Warehouse stuff, and it's already happening. And so we're gonna see this general rise in productivity and unemployment, kind of, in my opinion, kind of simultaneously there, and it's gonna happen for a while. And we're probably going to have to figure something out in terms of like, Sam Altman talks a lot about like the CEO of OpenAI. He talks a lot about like the social contract that we've been living in for the last 120 years, right? Which is like, hey, you move to a city, you get a job, you work the job, you get paid, you live, right? Something about that social contract is probably going to have to get rewritten. Certainly, I don't know if in 10 years that's the time frame, but like I look at my kids every day and I'm like, certainly in their lifetime, that social contract is going to change and it's going to get rewritten. And like no one knows exactly what the future is going to look like. Just on that point, I always try to just make sure that they're, yes, particularly my oldest, that he's like thinking problem solving builder state of mind versus, thinking that, he's just going to do some strange tasks and make a living. So we're going to see this rise happen. Like I said, across every industry, across every job category in every industry. And it just is what it is.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting what you said about the robotics. That we're definitely going to have that moment, just like AI with the robotics within that. I would say the next 2 years, right? Is the prediction.
Yeah.
So that's going to definitely, you know, with AI, right? Like you're able to be a lot more productive on, making a bigger impact on your job or your business. Same thing with robotics. I'm very interested to place my hours in order, to do the day-to-day stuff, and help out, our warehousing teams, lift up heavy stuffs. That'll be
100%. On that thing, we have a note here. It says 10-second freight quotes sound amazing, but would you trust a robot to classify your important shipment correctly, Tal? Would you trust AI and the robots to do a job for you?
I mean, so far, AI has been a great tool for all of us. Right? Obviously, I would not trust AI to do everything for me and just be out there. People think it's going to be able to do everything on it. No, it will help you, to boost your productivity by a lot, 10 times more. So no, no, I will not be, because we've seen the tools, right? Like it messes up, it does its own thing. Which, yeah, use it as a tool to help save you hours and hours of time to work on, bigger tasks that you making a bigger impact on the company. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, 70% there. I'll get you 70 or 80% there, and you got to do the rest.
Yeah, I would 100% trust the robot to classify important shipments. I almost would trust it more than I would trust a human being to, because at least the AI, it has very specific rules. And so once you set these things up, it's like, here's the rule, here's the output, right? And human beings are going to be able to, they're going to fall along that line, um, maybe pretty inconsistently, right? And so what happens when a human being gets, yeah, you know, no breaks, no, oh, I had a bad day. I'm a little sick. Oh, I'm just not feeling it. No, it's gonna input, output, input, output, input, output, input, output. And that input and output, particularly for something as simple as like giving out some freight quotes, cooked, brother, cooked.
How have you seen since joining in December up until now in 8 months that AI has helped us? Maybe percentage wise, what do you think? Like using AI has maybe just for yourself, like how has that helped?
First with us, right, the big push was, what do we need to do? We need to centralize all of our information, all of our data, so that we can actually use AI, right? I think we got to that point maybe around like the end of the, middle of the second quarter. Um, and so first thing is like centralizing your data so that it could be useful to you. And we have truly just like begun scratching the surface of what we're going to be able to do with AI, right? Because we even like, I'm an evangelist, but I also understand that you have to have certain things in order before you can kind of dive into these things, right? The data centralization, the very clear like work processes for what actually needs to get done. And so particularly here, when I stepped into the business, it's like, yeah, there's these tasks that like happen a million different ways every time. And it's like, what you need for AI is you need a very clear understanding. Like, here's the input and then here's the output so that you can do that. And so we're starting to get there. I would assume by the end of the year, things like rate quoting and all of that stuff, some of the customer service stuff is going to be very easy. It just takes a while. And there's only so much bandwidth and we're fighting for our ass right now. So, we're working through a lot of that. And then for myself, it's been the most impactful technological advancement I can think of, right? Like, I wasn't around for like the internet when the internet happened. I kind of, more or less have been internet native for most of my life that I can think of, right? I can remember being very young, like middle school, and not having internet access just because my household didn't have a computer. But certainly since I was like in high school, college, right, and my whole working years, and it's very impactful. The things that it's able to do now, I think, are pretty crazy. Like, the way you're able to, even just in OpenAI, how you're able to just stitch together kind of workflows. And that's what I've been using a lot for like sales outreach lately, right? We've talked about this, and part of what I'm gonna do, and this is another thing that we'll be leveraging AI for, is just to make that like super bespoke outreach very, easy to do. And I have done a lot of it, and now I fundamentally understand what that process is. So it's going to be easy to replicate across the organization and like, you know, piece together a couple innate in nodes and like let that thing run where you don't even need someone to kind of do most of that. Maybe to check the email before pressing send, but like honestly, that's it. But it's been super impactful, man. I almost am shocked like every week, every month, certainly. Every month I'm like, man, this is it's changing so fast. But, like it can do this, it can do that now. It can like, oh man, here's this extra use case, right? And so I use it in my life almost constantly.
Are you only using ChatGPT or are you using, I know you're using Claude as well. Are you using any other AI tools?
I use so it depends on what I'm doing. But I use Claude, I use Notebook LM, I use OpenAI. OpenAI is like my daily driver, right? I get in there and I do everything that I need to do. And I help my wife do this stuff in her content journey as well. So like, using this kind of this data analytics tool that is, I think, super, super helpful, and it's gonna really empower us to like kind of look at our data. It's called Julius, I believe. Like take in all of our data, use our data, and intuit information just kind of in real time. And we've been using like fractional CFO and like CPAs for stuff to like figure out certain stuff, right? And I think the era of that where you need hands-on stuff is gonna dwindle more. You're still gonna need them, but like I'm not gonna need to reach out to them to be like, hey, like what does this data set mean and like how should we plan for the future based on it, right? So I'm using a lot. My whole life is AI. I play around with all the video tools. I play around with literally everything. My kids play with it, right? Me and my son, like we made like a little mock video game a couple weekends back using AI. And it was just like a super simple like world dinosaur POV. And it's like, and he loved it. And it took us like, if I was a little bit more software engineer native, it would have been quicker, but it took us a couple hours and we did it and it was fun. And like, we've never touched it again, but like, that was fun. And I think it's interesting for him to be able to see that. And I always let him generate images and like stories. And he talks to the AI a lot, right? Whenever he has like,
And
he
this is
goes off on these
like
tangents.
5-year-olds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He talks to it a lot. Like he goes off on tangents. He'll talk to it for 30 minutes about like jet propulsion and how do you build bridges and like what's the deepest part of the ocean and like how do you get to outer space, right? And like ChatGPT, they have this conversation and it gives them like these scientific ways. And I also started doing this interesting thing with it where, and this is where the prompt engineering thing happens, where I will give ChatGPT like a prompt. So before I give him the phone on voice mode, I'll say, hey ChatGPT, give Amari a story, but make him make a decision about where the story is going to go next, right? And so they're going to be in the jungle and it's going to be like an action fast-paced story and make him have to make decisions to move the story forward. And then with that, there's this thing that happens with little kids when you reinforce like their decision-making process, right? And so I've been using it just in that way to like ensure that he's not like a passive consumer, right, of information and of AI, right? Yeah. So I literally use AI every day for everything. My family uses AI. I'm gonna make sure these kids are AI native. So what about you? Of
I mean, my kids are 3, so they're still young. So maybe in about a year and a half, I'll come to you for some tips. I really
course.
that you've been sharing, especially with your background in the NFL, about athleticism, putting them in some of these sports where like just win all that in about a year. So I take those tips, man. I'm feeding my AI, building a path for my kids for their success. Like look, not only for you, but you want to be able to put a path for our family to succeed, right? One
Yes.
day we're not gonna be here. And we really need to leave behind something for them to like a playbook, right?
Uh-huh.
They can, and especially I think with AI, and it'll be a lot easier for them to research. But hey, if you can build your own model and leave it to them, like, hey, this is how we would think to make life decisions, right? Because critical thinking is going to be very important, in the coming years. Because this with social media, doom scrolling, man, I'm really concerned about a lot of people around you, right? So who do I actually want my kids to be around? Doom schoolers for sure. So those things are definitely always on my mind. So I'm a big chess fan. So I got one chessboard right next to me. So try to play a lot of chess. So that's a good game for to So actually, I'm in the process of building a chess game with AI, so I've been just kind of testing that out. So
There we go.
so well, and real fun creative chess game because there's a lot out there, but they're boring. So yeah.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, your point about critical thinking, I think, is super important. In an age where information is abundant and you can get the answer to anything, and it's been like this for a while. The thing that sets you apart is how well you can think and how well you can like decide which task is necessary next, right? I think about this a lot, like within the context of our organization, right? Like there's people who do a very good job of knowing what to do next, right? And then there's people who like don't do a good job of knowing what to do next. And we love them as well, but it would be a lot easier if, people had more agency. And I think that that agency is something that can be refined and defined in a person, which is kind of what I'm trying to do with my kids. And I have them do these like, these bespoke stories. But yeah, it's gonna be a crazy ride, man. I'm excited, but I'm also terrified at the same time because so much is gonna change in such a short amount of time. I don't think people realize how quickly this thing could take over and displace certain types of jobs and displace the way that we feel about ourselves and the economy and it's going to be a crazy time, dude. Crazy, crazy time.
So Steve Jobs actually shared something about this was very interesting. That really like was stuck in my mind. I wanted to share this with you guys. That you know I've been looking at the greats of the world, like artists, legends, from the history, right? So it's like I'm very interested in stuff like that, like looking at why did why was this person so great? What made him great? So Alexander the Great was mentored by Aristotle, right? So that story was very interesting to me. I was like, hey, so I started looking deep into it, and somebody actually made in chatbot and posted on, there to if you were to ask Aristotle, like, to do, man, that was very interesting to see. And what you can do with AI nowadays, right? You could build an app or a tool, that somebody, like this can be a mentor, right? So, man, that was very interesting. I want the deep rabbit hole of history, you know, one of these days. So,
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. I have a couple of very interesting prompts that I use. One for storytelling. Anyone who knows me knows that in my free time I like fiction writing, screenplays, and other kind of stories and world building. But there's these two prompts I use, and both of them are designed as like, hey, you are a like my creative board of directors, right? And so there's like Tarantino's on the board, right? And like Toni Morrison is on the board, right? And like all these prolific creators are on the board, and you give them a bunch of information about who these people are and how they make decisions, creative decisions, right? And it's this bespoke prompt. And essentially what you do is you talk to it about ideas and it works through the ideas with you from their POV. So it's like you're in a board meeting and you're talking about, I have this like interesting story that I build sometimes in the late night when I need to take my brain off of JNS stuff. And it's super helpful. And I talk to them about like creative decisions that could or couldn't be made and how you build out story there. To your point, there's also one that I've used in the past about that's kind of more a traditional business board of directors, right? And so imagine you got Sam Zell and Steve Jobs and Estee Lauder, right? On your board, right? What are they going to tell you about this situation maybe that you're going through, right? And so you're kind of obviously it's not them, but it is heavily influenced by their thinking and by the information that you give them about who those people are in order to kind of give you just more information to make a better decision from extra POVs. And so, to your point, I think that's a very interesting use case for AI that certainly I've leaned into, and I think people could lean into even more in the future. Yeah, dude. Yeah, dude. So we've gone pretty long here. The truck makers are suing CARB over clean truck partnership obligations. This is just an ongoing saga. Do we need to what's the take here? Obviously, the new administration doesn't care much about any of these rules for good reason also, right? Like, our biggest competitor, rival, people would say is China, and they don't care about any of this. They only care about like building and making more stuff, right? And they're going to burn as much coal and burn as much gas as they need to do this. And I think when if we're going to win a global race for dominance and continue to be in the pole position to push democracy as the main narrative of the world, right? Then like we need not hamstring ourselves by carb regulations and
Yeah,
things
just
of that nature.
$97 trillion debt. All these wars we funded, still funding. Like, yeah, focus on the real shit. Like our government needs to really focus on, if especially with AI. I think they're really taking AI seriously. And the thing is, like, look at China. They're doing all of this stuff to use water, and there was news like they were taking away a lot of water from India on the border.
I
And
saw that.
just look at the crazy amount of shit China has done. And what it was, like, India got independence like 75 years ago, and what it usually takes is like 150 years for economy to start booming, like the US, right? So look, China and India are not far behind. Yeah, sure, America is gonna be great. We're gonna be number one for a while, but hey, take a page out of their book. What these countries are doing right now. They're focusing out on AI, solar and all of that. So yeah, I mean, yeah, they got billion people, so that helps as well, I guess. So, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you're locked in, if you're trying to be number one, do you use all of your tools or some of your tools? Like, sports analogy, if you are a team, and the joy of America is we have so many natural resources. We got all this oil, all this coal, all this natural gas. So imagine you're a football team and like you have just the greatest quarterback. You got this great running back. The offensive line is awesome. But the head coach walks in one day and he says, "Hey guys, actually, we're going to start the number 2 guy just because, it's not that fair. His muscles are too big, right? Like, the running back, we like him, but we're only going to give him 10 touches a game just because, we feel like, it would be better to develop some of these other guys." It's like, it's just not an efficient use of time and energy and resources. Like, you want to win even with AI, right? Like you're gonna have to produce a lot of electricity. How do you produce electricity? You're gonna need a lot of gas. You're gonna need a lot of natural gas. You're gonna need, you know what I'm saying? You're gonna need to boost your production of literally everything. And that stuff's not gonna happen by a bunch of bureaucrats somewhere saying that like there's going to be these artificial caps on like what can and can't be done based on science that is, depending on who you talk to, correct or incorrect, right? So yeah. Well, spectacular there, Tal.
Yeah, guys, holidays are right around the corner, and we're very excited to be alive and making it through. I think I'm very or how do you say it, blessed, proud for our team. That we're pushing through it, and we'll keep pushing through it, keep serving our customers. Just another thought that I had was, it's been what, over a month, and a lot of the customers' freight is still stuck in the GSE yard that they can't get out, and that's causing somebody a lot of pain and a lot of money, which you know, uh, which is something to think about. Uh, you don't want to be one of those customers. So, guys, do choose your carriers wisely now who you want to work with. So hopefully, some of these tips that we hear, talk about here, do help make better decisions to all of our customers and drivers and staff. Stick with the best, and we are the best, and we will always be the best.
We are grinding towards it, right? Um, yeah, well, that being said, thank you guys. This was another episode of Shift Happens with myself, Darian Weems.
So, guys, tell next week.
Toodles.